Hello and welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Appreciate everyone joining us. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ethan Cohen and I run UK sales at Remobi. For those who don't know Remobi, we're one of the fastest growing consultancies in the data and AI space. We operate in over 27 countries and help some of the world's largest organizations build high performing AI and data teams. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Julian Wiffen, the Chief of AI and Data Science at Matillion. Now, Matillion are a super exciting business. They're one of the UK's more recent tech unicorns and a real data and AI success story. And I've been thoroughly looking forward to this conversation and going through the details
Cool.
with you. So, Julian,
Thanks,
it's
Ethan.
great to have you here. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's good. Exciting and busy day up in Manchester today, but looking forward to seeing if we get some interesting questions here and explaining a bit of our story.
Oh, brilliant. No, I do appreciate you joining. Now, Julian, do you want to give an intro to yourself, to what we may be talking
Yeah,
about today?
cool. Yeah, so I mean, I lead a team that drives research and Matillion in terms of how AI can be wrapped into the products. And we work hand in glove with the software team to develop a lot of the functionality we're going to be talking about today. What Matillion does is make it easy to get your data into business ready or research ready formats, get it into the right place. And particularly our showcase functionality Maia, which we're going to be talking about today, provides agentic data engineering, effectively an assistant, a co-pilot for data engineers to make it really trivial to load and transform data and get it into any format you need, and to debug any issues going on with your data pipelines, and just make data engineering way more productive as a function.
Brilliant. Thank you. And just to set the scene today for everyone, so we're going to cover your product, Maia, and there'll be a few
Yeah,
topics in regards
yeah,
to what Maia actually is, how it
yeah,
works, how you've done it, and from a personal interest as well, how you've built it, whether it comes to staffing, tech, build versus buy, what you've learned since going live
yeah,
last year, the success and
yeah,
horror stories, and how to use it.
yeah.
And for the audience, we'll keep the conversation free flowing. We'll have
Mm,
time for a Q&A at the end, but please
mm,
do feel free to drop questions into the chat box on the side or this side, depending where
yeah.
I've been mirrored, and we'll and we'll pick them up.
Cool,
Awesome.
cool. Okay, I'll kick us off then in that case.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So yeah, as Ethan said, we're going to do I'll do a little bit of introduction to just what is Maia and why our customers find it valuable. And move straight into a demo because with generative AI, a lot of people say a lot of stuff, but seeing it, the proof is usually in the pudding. Then once you've seen a little bit of in action, I'll talk about how it works, kind of what's going on under the hood. And I think probably most interestingly for this audience, a chunk about the history of it, the lessons we learned along the way, what we learned for the team, our advice to people that are considering building agentic tools themselves. Um, so in short, Maia is a digital data engineer. On the right-hand side, you see a screenshot of our platform. We used to call the Data Productivity Cloud. We've labeled it Maia Foundations now because the agentic functionality is such a core to what we offer. Maia lets you build data pipelines, the ability to load and transform data in simple business language, in English, or in fact, as I've touched on, I'll touch on later in this presentation, actually in any language you fancy. We've got users using it in Japanese or French, even though we've done no specific localization. Um, Allows you to describe what you want done. It then builds out the data pipelines, builds out the functionality that's going to happen to your data. And of course, because it's a graphical low-code platform, you see all the components on the right-hand side. It's very easy to then inspect the logic of what it's built, and understand the transformation it's doing for you, sample the data all along the way. It's very easy to self-serve. Allows data analysts to self-serve and get their own data instead of waiting for a data engineering team ticket to come through. Allows the data engineers to become very super productive. Why is it useful? Sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
No, all good. I was just going to chime in and say I think what's cool to mention as well, Julian. So
Yeah,
for a bit of background, we met at Big Data London last
London.
year.
Yeah,
I saw a demo that you and
mm,
your colleague in product gave, and I thought it was brilliant. I
yeah,
spend a lot of time with AI products every day, particularly like
mm,
industry
yeah,
product-led
yeah,
businesses. And
yeah,
if I'm honest, I'm fairly critical of what's
yeah,
in the market right now. There's a lot of hype, but what you
mm,
built with this, particularly with
mm,
Maya, it is really cool and it really stood
yeah,
out. So yeah, got a lot of questions on it, but just thought I'd give the background of
yeah.
how I think this is pretty
Cool,
unique.
cool. Yep. And why what we're delivering is valuable. Data engineering teams are already a pinch point for most organizations. We're not aware of any data engineering team in the world, but maybe one or two that love our products, that feel like they're on top of their backlog. There's already tons of sources providing information and tons of SaaS systems requiring it or needing it to consume. And the world of Gen AI and machine scale is just going to make that worse. The proliferation of Gen AI tools means there's way more sources feeding and creating data, and there's way more hunger for it. And equally, the data team, for a lot of the folks, are at risk of being the villains of the story about why a company's AI project, much hyped AI project, fails, because they become the choke point for getting the fuel it needs, the data it needs to work. So it's generative AI generating more data and needs more data, so it puts even more load on the data team. So what we're offering is a way in which Gen AI actually helps shift that load by making them way more productive. The kind of use cases we're seeing here, the kind of use that people are driving. There's a degree of stack consolidation. We'll touch on later how we found that it's very easy to consume legacy code and bring in jobs from Informatica or Alteryx or other platforms that can then be translated by Maia into pseudocode and back into Matillion jobs. It's great to drive staff augmentation. It's allowing people to be super productive. We've had customers doing bake-offs where in one pharmaceutical company, actually I can say it was Merck, had the data engineers did a bake-off where two people tried to do the same task. One with Maia did it in an hour, one without Maia took 10 hours. So it's massive productivity gains. Some of them are even bigger than that, and allows the teams to finally get on top of their roadmap. So whether it's keeping the team lean and or just getting on top of the huge demands for data hitting your team, Maia's providing our customers with a lot of value. So I'm going to step out of this and move to the demo. Hopefully you're seeing the screen here with our Data Productivity Cloud showing. If not. And you see on the left-hand side, the panel here where I just chat with Maia. On the right-hand side, currently you see existing files or existing jobs, but you'll start to see Maia build stuff out that follows the instructions. So I'm going to keep it fairly simple for this event because we haven't got an enormous amount of time. I'm going to say I want to build a music playlist. I'm chatting in very non-technical language here. Say find my song list data. Let's say filter, keep just soul and let's say soul and blues, short tracks under 5 minutes long, nothing dirty because it's for the family. Family, get me the 50 most popular from them. I'll set that going. And Maia will start processing and thinking. We're calling large language models under the bonnet here. We're working with Amazon Bedrock. We use the Anthropic Claude models here. You see Maia's thoughts. It's going to start off triggering. It's triggering various tools. It's trying to start to find music-related tables here, and it's found my Spotify tracks table. It's able, because it's an agentic process, to do thinking in parallel. So it's thinking about what it needs to do to break down the tasks. You see it scrolling there. It's found a duration, but duration in milliseconds. So it's already converted my 5 minutes there. It's found an explicit flag. So it's going to make family-friendly content by keeping that false. And it needs to filter the genre. Started to build that out. It's done that already pretty quick. So I can start to sample this data once it's finished. The interesting part about what we've got here, well, let's sample it, let it do its own work, is we can let Maia sample, we can let Maia build, but I can also sample myself so I can see what it's done along here. So here's my Spotify tracks. It's configured the component by selecting a bunch of the relevant columns from that already. It's built a filter, it's got it right first time, where it said, I said soul and blues, but it's realized it needs to be equal to. See how it's doing there. I can then sample that data and make sure that's what's going on. So I've built this here to say, yep, I can see the blues tracks in there. I can do things like, look again at this, it's put the flags on here for the explicit flag and the duration, all super simple, rank by popularity, and then filtered it to within 50. So if I sample this, I should only have 50 tracks here or so. slightly more. Yeah, it's got 50 tracks there, all meeting our criteria of nothing explicit, under a certain duration, by soul and blues. Not quite finished, so it's actually suggested, yes, save to a new table. Suggests some logical quick actions for me to drive it. We've been learning as we go with this in terms of all sorts of discoveries. We found, I haven't got any loaded up here, I can create skills, which are kind of standing sets of instructions. I can give it context files, which are notes on my data landscape and how things are laid out. And now it's added a save playlist to run to the blue to create this. You can see it's very small here. It's created a little pipeline, little mermaid diagram of what it's done. I'll let it run. Should trigger that and create that task. I have some permission controls here. So some users might not want to give it permission to run. Some users might not want to give it permission to sample, but that will probably limit its functionality a chunk because its ability to get feedback is super powerful. I'll also show another example of what happens if we break it. So I'm going to deliberately make a mistake with this. I'm going to change that to an and I'm going to say help someone broke. No, it's not that right. It's usually typo resilient. Broke my pipeline. No data through. What's wrong? Hopefully it should be able to sample and inspect and figure out the issue with the pipeline here. Yeah, very quickly. I mean, it's pretty trivial item to find. Some of our debugging obviously involves multi-layered pipelines, looking at variables and like. Let's reset that back to OR. So I could stop it if I really wanted to here. It's found what was broken. And I can then say, okay, if I'm done with that, here's my pipeline. It's ready to schedule and run. Okay, so I'm going to say looks good. Commit the changes. And then that'll just integrate that, trigger our integration to GitHub and actually publish the little pipeline we've built there. Now, obviously, you saw that took, a couple of minutes to build, even when I poked about with it. That's probably the sort of task that would take somebody 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes if they were not familiar with the product. But here again, it's super quickly it's published and created a commit message here about the change. So that's just a short overview of what Maia can do. Gives it a little flavor, how quick and snappy it is, and how easy it is to chat to it in natural language. So I kind of pause there for a second if you've got any questions before we tag back to our slides.
Yeah, defo one from me, potentially a controversial one, but what would you say to the, I guess, junior engineer or junior data focused professional that's coming into the industry, seeing this product?
Yeah,
it's almost impossible for a human to correct its own mistakes as quick as that, or even realize them as quick as that. What advice would you give to, I guess, the younger generation getting into the data world?
Yeah, there's several bits, and we'll probably repeat some of these later in the presentation. But one I'd say is don't despair. There's plenty of new work being created in this space. As I was just talking about before, there's so much in the way of data churning, data work being created by other generative AI projects. The ability to work with unstructured sources means there's massively more demand. Second is the availability of these kind of coding co-pilots in software development, and obviously Maia for data engineers. Really what we're seeing is just raise the floor at which you come in at. So the level of basic tasks now is much higher that you start doing because you find it easy to do. We'll talk later on about how this moves everyone up the stack in terms of the complexity of work that they can tackle. So the kind of task that used to be reserved for a data engineer of a couple of years experience is probably what someone who's a junior will now find themselves doing, a couple of weeks into their first job. And that senior data engineer is doing stuff that would have gone to the technical lead, and the technical lead is operating at just an unprecedented scale. All I can say is that while some jobs do get displaced, the amount of new work that's being created is huge. And like I say, the data being created also generates more demand for more data. I've never in my career presented a report or a dashboard without immediately ending up with a request for more analysis and more data to be compiled. I think it's just going to shift the type of work you do, and things that were long and probably quite dull tasks now become quite mundane and quite quick and easy to do. there's another aspect, actually. I'm not going to demo it today, but some of the stuff we've been able to do with generative AI aside from Maia is to bring generative AI into transforming unstructured data, and allows you to do things like go through survey responses and ask each one, okay, give me a yes or no tag. Does this survey response actually contain some actionable feedback about our product? Or we had a customer that was doing medical stuff where they were going to process voice notes from patients and then tag each diary with, do they mention taking the medication today? Do they mention feeling down or depressed? Do they mention a symptom such as nausea? And allows you to create structured data that can then be analyzed out of unstructured sources that previously would have been way too labor intensive for anyone to crunch or work with. So while it's removing some work, it's creating great reams of it elsewhere.
Awesome, thank you. And a question on the self-correction as well that you briefly touched on, but how much trust you have in terms of like complete autonomous trust in the product now that it will correct its own mistakes?
I would say it's not. I wouldn't regard it as cast iron. I wouldn't leave it to fix issues in production alone without someone validating. But we're starting to find, in terms of the way we work with it, it's very similar to the way you'd work with a colleague in terms of, like, if you imagine doing pull requests when a product is ready, code is ready to be committed and merged. You still want a second pairs of eyes on it. It might be that the code was created by Maia and the reviewer is human, or it might be that the code was created by a human and the reviewer is Maia. One of the things we like about this, what we've got in the product, is it allows you to switch between modes. So you can do the kind of manual edit like I did there to create the error, and then chat to Maia and have it build on that. You can have Maia update a pipeline created by a human, or a human can edit a pipeline or a piece of pipeline that Maia has written. It's very easy to tag back and forth. But I think in terms of trust, it'll be the same as trusting a skilled colleague. Yes, you could leave them to it, but it's probably safest to have at least someone to validate exactly what it's done. We'll touch on this more, but it's very easy for some of the other code generation tools to write you a load of Python or SQL to do what some of the stuff I've just shown. A chunk of what we're offering is, because we're a low-code platform, it's very easy to see what it's done and to validate its output, to sample what it's got and say, does this match what I was expecting?
For sure. So we're still at tool, not quite takeover, but definitely a powerful tool.
Yeah, a very powerful tool. So if I probably go back to some of the slide content, we'll talk a little bit more about how it works, and what it can do and what's going on. So there's a lot. You saw it building a pipeline there and correcting one. Obviously, we found a nice touch in terms of creating Git commit messages and doing Git diffs and saying, okay, what's actually changed here? I touched on it could convert a lot of legacy formats, so it's proving very popular for customers who've got large and elderly Informatica or Alteryx estates, which is great reams of SQL scripts to get everything into the one consolidated platform. It's good at optimizing pipelines, kind of going through, looking for where there's opportunities to parallel process or make them more efficient. It's great at root cause analysis, explaining all the error messages. One of my favorite stories we had is our tech support sent a message back saying, you can close the case now. We didn't quite understand what Matillion tech support told us, but Maia did, and that fixed the problem. So it was able to translate from something that was maybe too technical to the user back into something that was actionable. There's a lot that can be driven there. How's it actually working? If I push this forward. So the graphical platform you saw there's a YAML format underneath this. This was actually one of our most interesting learnings when we started 3 years ago in this space. What we call DPL, the data pipeline language, is just a proprietary YAML format for storing the configuration of those components. So telling you that you've got a connection to an S3 bucket or a connection to a particular API, and then configuring the parameters just as if a human user had filled them in. When we first tried this, we assumed that the model would have seen lots of SQL and Python could write that, but that they would have no chance of working with this YAML format because it was proprietary. It had never really been shared outside of the company. But because we made it pretty human readable, we designed it to be human readable, it became very easy to edit. So our first experiments were just asking it to document existing pipelines, and then now it's able to edit them, update them, create them from a blank sheet of paper. And that process of like Maia's effectively, we were really using the LLM's ability to read and just understand what's going on. So it will edit that and then push that back into the UI, and of course the UI updates to reflect its changes. And then you can either have Maia carrying on editing it, or you can go in and change it yourself if you don't like what it's done. What's similarly in terms of the platform itself, little bit of background here. Matillion agent will pull in, sit on top of a cloud data warehouse, whether that's Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift, but it will then generate those transformations to be pushed down and executed on that data warehouse. So we're sitting in a control plane, and then Maia's just helping us configure that control plane. We also pull in, connect to vast ranges of data sources. Pretty much anything that's got an API, we can create a connector for now. And one of Maia's best party tricks is you give it the documentation for a connector, and it'll configure it all for you, which churning through API documentation is one of those usually quite tedious tasks most engineers are not that excited to do. So it saves a lot of labor there. What's truly going on at the heart of it, this is the core engine. There's no specially customized model working on this. We're currently on Opus 4.5 as the mate for most tasks, with a little bit of Claude Haiku. That picture will continually evolve. There's been a lot of questions over the years about whether you fine tune. What we found is that the frontier models are advancing so fast that really you just optimize what you give them as instructions and tools. And we haven't yet hit a point where we've really needed to actually build our own model, which we think is an area that's probably going to be very expensive, and you're at risk of being obsolete even if you surpass the frontier models for a while. In 6 months or 12 months, OpenAI or Anthropic's research budget is probably going to blow you away unless you're an enormous player. There's probably room to explore with the small language models for distillation in the future, but for now we haven't needed to get to that point. But this is the agentic loop, and the loops are actually pretty simple. Really, it's all talking about each step. You're calling an LLM and making it decide whether it's got enough information to finish the task, or whether it needs to call a tool to execute some sub piece. So, for example, it has a tool to go and query what tables are in the data warehouse, or describe the layout of the particular table. It's got a tool to sample a component on that pipeline so it can look at the data the same way a human would, and use that to make judgment calls. We found that sampling a really valuable bit of feedback. And obviously it can edit files, it can write documentation. And it'll just keep going through this loop, deciding either whether it needs to trigger a tool or finish the job, and then either kind of return to the user. There's a bit of an exception loop where it can say, okay, you've been churning in a loop for too long. You've got to break and go back to the user and ask for further instructions because you're stuck. We see that less and less now in terms of how often it occurs. Is very infrequent. In the current model a year ago, it was occurring quite a lot. But if you're building an agentic system, this kind of loop is all the heart of it. And a lot of it just comes down to the context information you give the LLM and the tools you make available with it the levers you give it to pull. Talked about this earlier. This is kind of, in some ways, our biggest competition is probably people wanting to do text to SQL and vibe coding. And if you want to build your SQL that way, manage your data that way, kind of fair play to you. That's the ultimate hand coding, high touch end. Where we see the gains is that anyone can write a lot of SQL. It's very easy to quickly get to a point where that SQL is very, if a model's writing it for you, is very long and hard to unpick. So yeah, it's quick to write, but then it's hard to maintain. Whereas what we're doing is configuring something that's very super easy to understand, is much easier to maintain and explain. Also easy to control. And of course, we have the benefits of a platform with a whole lot of pre-configured connections, ability to plug into your Salesforces and your ServiceNows and whatever other platforms, or a wide range of cloud data warehouses. So that are kind of a powerful. Our main offer over just putting stuff into Claude is that it's explainable and understandable. The other factor that really helps drive the accuracy is, unlike just writing a piece of SQL and then executing it, Maia gets a feedback loop. these things are all configured green here. The little components are showing in green with green circles. If there's any errors in the way they're connected, say one of those connectors was broken or one of the parameters was missing, that would then show up as red. Which is designed to alert the human user that the correction is needed. But equally, Maia will try and validate when it's finished each step, and obviously it will look at the error message and try and respond to that. And that allows it to iterate. Similarly, it can sample and see what's coming through, just check there's the right kind of number of rows coming through and the data looks sensible. You can see, I've seen it correct itself, say, for example, setting up to do a couple of joins between a couple of tables, say, product details compared to a sales table, and it builds the join, gets no data through, and then when it inspects, it works its way back up the chain and goes, oh, I want my way back to the join. Oh, this join's the join's not getting any data. Go a step further, I look at them. Oh, the product name is in uppercase in one table and in proper case in the other. I need to make my join case insensitive. And all of that I saw Maia churn through in a minute or so and correct itself live on screen. That ability to get a feedback loop and fix is really what allows you to give it quite complex tasks and let it work away and explore methods. Going to validate, yeah. So like, you jump in with some questions, Ethan.
Yeah, just an interesting one that's popped into my head. So given the complexity and how impressive it is at self-correction, what would you say is the most surprising feedback you've had from clients? Because I can't imagine it's loads of, there's not going to be the language model errors, I imagine. But yeah, would you say there's any either funny or outstanding feedback you've had since clients have deployed this?
Ooh, interesting one. There's certainly, you get a range of responses in terms of how keen people are to adopt it. Some love it and jump right in. Some are skeptical. They don't skeptical of anything Gen AI. Some will go for it if they see good examples. We've had we've had one or two who've really set out to try and break it. And they said, like, we got this error of like context, of like running out of the context window for the conversation. And then we looked at the traces, and it was a case of, guys, you did feed it War and Peace. You did give it a 100,000 word document to start with, and no opportunity to break that down. But there, I think there's, I don't think there's any other good stories of that one. Not that I wanted to give to scare any data engineers present, because there's been a few customers. We do find actually it plays best when demonstrated to a combination of both a business leader and a technical leader or a technical person in the audience. Because if we teach the technical person alone, some will love it. Some are technophiles and will love it and will try it and will be straight in. Some, if they're led to it in the right way and get a chance to get hands-on, and then they start to see how much it can help them do their job, and then they start to adopt it, but they kind of need the right push to go there. And some are skeptical of AI or dislike it or see it as a threat to them and will always be hostile. Equally, from the business leaders, a lot of people will have heard, anyone that's a business budget holder or a line of business owner or a data team leader will have had the world promised to them about every Gen AI product for the last 2 years solid. So we come along with a presentation and we promise these wonderful things, and everybody says, sounds great, but how do I believe it, in that kind of response. What goes really well is we've got both audience members of both of those at the same place. The business leader says, can it really do that? And the data engineer tends to say, yeah, yes, it can. Sometimes enthusiastically, sometimes through gritted teeth, but you need to get the two together so the technical person validates the claims for you on the spot. I think that's awesome. Kind of cool. I suppose actually the other, in terms of fun memories or fun stories with it, feedback wise, it can actually we give the ability to draw little charts and drew little graphs in this chat panel. Was it sampling the data just to show you like data quality? It's not designed to be a visualization tool. We don't want to replace a visualization tool, but it lets people see the shape of data. And someone was demoing with a bunch of data from the Formula One teams. And only after the video, someone watched the replay and said, we checked through and he didn't specify anywhere, but the model just chose the team livery colors as the colors on the bar chart without being instructed at all. It just naturally done it as a good data visualization best practice, which was fun to see.
No, that is cool. Yeah, it's interesting when you really get into the thick of it, the mind of its own that it's got and how that's going to develop, because we are still very early on in the journey, aren't we, overall? So
yeah, I mean, this is our kind of timeline to show how short a period it's really been. So we'd started our first experiments pretty early on in early 2023, really. we did a hackathon. It was actually a Microsoft sponsored hackathon, and this was one of our big learnings. Like sometimes when you've got an idea, just get hands on and try it. Let some of your technical folks play a bit and see what they can come up with. How they can start with a problem and then see what they can do to address it. We quickly managed to get it to a point where it could start doing basic edits to the data productivity data productivity language. Gradually, we created a default R&D team for this and started to build things up to effectively creating AI notes as the first functionality so that they could comment on things. And then we started building some of the tools to manipulate unstructured data. And finally, then launched Copilot and then Maia itself. The evolution here is interesting. So over the space of a year, the Copilot that we launched in May 2024 was very much, if I was building the thing I was giving to you there, you'd be asking it basically one component at a time. You'd be saying, can you find me the table with the Spotify tracks? Can you then filter that for the blues and soul? Can you then filter it based on time? Can you then do a rank component or similar? But the quality of the underlying models and the effectively us getting better at giving it standing system prompts and giving it better tools and the ability to feedback moves to the sort of thing that what I demoed there being pretty trivial. We've got customers that are importing large numbers of jobs from other platforms and saying, okay, I'm just going to batch up 100 different SQL scripts and have each one being turned into a pipeline like you saw, because it can work pretty autonomously. We're gradually working now towards a point where it becomes more like just instead of a chat interface, you could actually provide Jira tickets and have it work on a ticket-based basis. And then you just go into that interface if you want to inspect or debug or when you're doing the review. So progress has been very, very fast in terms of a technology adoption here.
For sure. I think that timeline is like the industry is exponential. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where it gets to. I want to ask as well, Julian, this is more for personal interest rather than the tech side. But when you, number one, who put together the idea? Like, what was the first conversation about this? And number two, your initial founding team for this. How did you build that? What was the strategy?
Cool. Yeah. So the very first remit, so I actually joined Matillion about 3.5 years ago with a remit to build a data science team and build a team that, in addition to doing the traditional data science functions, also looked at how AI and machine learning could be brought into the product. And that then joined effectively with the time of Gen AI started to come out. So hence this piece here in early 2023, where we just started with some experiments. And that was kind of us in the data science team kicking it about and saying, do we think, can we do anything with it? We did an awful lot of kind of watching people's blogs and YouTube videos where they'd done something cool within Python with a large language model and started to build things. I think the hackathon was a very interesting lesson because we were very successful, I think, because we brought together myself as a data scientist, Sam Perrin, who's the principal software engineer, and Cyril Sonnefort, who's the product manager, and we are now still the three folks effectively leading the whole Maia project. And it's bringing that multidisciplinary team together. And a little bit, some of those experiments were highlighted how we didn't speak each other's language at the time. I remember through that week where we were working on it, obviously I'm building things in Python, interacting with the models who at the time only really had SDKs for Python. And Sam's trying to convert them into Java because that's what our UI looks like. And we had some painful lessons about, what do you mean you can't just chuck a CSV file into Java and have it work out the put it into a data frame or a table for you? That's it's all got to be declared. And similarly, learning the gaps in each other's other skill sets. Increasingly, that's kind of evolved over these last couple of years to be a mix of the teams. We actually now have both the data scientists and the software devs in the same scrum. We're in the same agile ceremonies, working together off the same Jira boards. A little bit, there's had to be a bunch of compromise between the teams in learning working styles. So the data scientists have had to learn a lot more about Git and pull requests, how to write a ticket, how to actually do a spike where you build something out rather than write a report. And equally, the software dev team have had to be comfortable the way a data scientist is with not knowing whether you can do the thing when you start and having a very vague brief and a very vague scope that it will be investigated as you explore the space and what the models are capable of. but we kind of learned from each other, and we certainly found putting them together seems to be the core to success. Increasingly, calling the models is just going to be a functionality of the software engineer's job. And where the data science expertise comes in is evaluation. How do you design the tests? How do you design the methods to test them and see what they're doing?
So a lean team, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, we've gradually grown over the last couple of years. Last year, for the first year, we kept it very, very lean indeed. It was like half a dozen people effectively, and that enabled us to move at a pace. The real other good lesson was success in this. So what we delivered in 2024 showed a lot of promise, and obviously gained a chunk of trust from the board and some excitement for customers. But at that point, it was mostly a novelty rather than it demoed nicely, but they couldn't quite see it. We had to get to the level of capability we did in 2025 to really show true productivity gains and value. But from that's generated a lot of customer excitement and hence a lot of trust in the team from the board and from the organization as a whole. And that means that we then have a lot more freedom to experiment. We're doing some equally very experimental stuff now that relates to what we call knowledge graphs and how we capture the contextual information. And that's, again, stuff that's never been done before. We chatted to some of the vendors in space like Neo4j. I was quite heartened when one of the vendors from Neo4j said, "You guys are pretty far off the map when you're in terms of what you're trying to do here." But you need to have some built credibility with your stakeholders and the people paying the bills by delivering the first features, and that gets you permission to keep experimenting and keep the pace of change going.
100%. I'm quoting my CEO Andy here, but he always talks about strategy over execution. Sorry, execution over strategy, and it's you've got to have the right team to get it done. So sounds awesome.
Yeah. Cool. So some of the things we learned along the way, I touched on this before. The model's very polyglot. You could chat to. We discovered by accident this, and I was very pleased to tell my French colleagues that they could talk to it in French. They hadn't actually tried. We've got people using it in Japanese and all sorts of languages. The other factor, you'll have seen that we're through the model we've got there, through the platform we're working with. There's a lot of power in constraining the output, asking a model to make a yes/no decision or to configure a component and then give it feedback. So you're taking the non-deterministic power of the LLM and asking it to configure something that then goes back into a deterministic box you can check and push back into the cycle. So it's then very easy to give it feedback to act on and measure its performance, because you could check how often those programmatic validations work or not. Getting that feedback loop is super powerful, and giving it putting it in a box certainly then gives you a lot more ability to evaluate and then therefore iterate towards improvement. And that I'm trying to give lessons here in terms that might be generally relevant to people considering agentic use cases for agentic tools for their use case. Our other really big lesson you might see from that timeline slide is, if it kind of half works now, don't abandon it. Whatever you do, don't bin it off. If it's if it's at the level where it does a cool demo, squint and it works right, but you're only the happy path is working right now, don't write it off as a failure. There's so much going on. You can just park one project, come back to it in 3 months or 6 months. There's so much research going on in this space right now, so many people offering new tools, and just the core rate at which the quality of the frontier models advances is quite often you can come back to that chunk of code that you parked 3-4 months ago and find now with a new model, actually it's working pretty reliably. When we first started that editing of the DPL, we would fire 5 copies of the request off to OpenAI in parallel, and take the first one that came back in actually the well-formed JSON format wrapped around it. Now we never have that error. That problem's gone completely. So the rate of evolution is such that it's best don't get to a project being written off. Just like I say, just park it, come back to it if you think it's got value, because the tech is moving so fast.
I have interest, Julian. When it comes to being as forward-thinking as possible, would you advise your team or anyone trying to do this in the industry to always be up to date with the latest technologies, or do you think it's better to pick a direction, run with it? And everything changes so quickly, though. So what do you think?
I mean, one is you've always got to keep current in this space. It's an advantage where you kind of with your team set up formats for your team to knowledge share, kind of reward or encourage people to take a bit of time to you see a new article, you see a new paper comes out, you see a new tool, to let the team play around with it a bit, let them try encourage. We encourage hack days in terms of experimentation. Um, a lot of people do these as hobby things in their evenings or weekends, or even or on hack day, but allowing the team to take half a day a week to just experiment or keep current. Like I've set expectations with the data science team that spending half a day to a day a week just reading academic papers is perfectly valid. And it's the same, for software devs to try out new packages, new and learn. And the dev team's learned a lot from just the fact they use Claude Code and have tried the different variations of coding assistants and can learn patterns from that. So yeah, just encourage knowledge sharing quite a lot of the time. So quite a lot of the conversations are just somebody sharing a link to an interesting announcement or a blog or an advertised bit of tech, and a few people commenting, and then someone else will pick it up and try it for their use case.
Brilliant. Thank you. Good insight.
We're going to go away. That touches on my other big advice: is like just try it. For us, nothing beats getting hands-on with it. Some of our biggest innovations have come from just experimenting and just trying to push the limits of the tech we've already got, and encourage your users to push it and experiment with it and try and drive it. The experimentation doesn't have to be confined to the data science team or to the software devs. Encourage your power users to really push its limits and give you feedback on what it can do. And for folks in the space, particularly if you're very early in career, you're trying to get your first job, or if you're in a career, if you're between jobs, you're looking, keeping your skills current and building up a portfolio of interesting work really helps, and gives you stuff that you can show off your personal GitHub, gives you something to talk about in interviews, and gives you something valuable you can bring to the table, just by experimenting and keeping current on that. Cool. We also talked about how feedback loops are really powerful. The more ambiguous the input, the more ambiguous the results are. What we found is that well-written documents also really drive it. We've had quite a lot of our innovations has come from just tightening up the documentation that was maybe a bit loosely written, or done as a bit of an afterthought when a component was made, because good documentation for a human is also good documentation is good for an AI. Like we had a classic case, not with Maia, but with something we do where we do support case answering by large language model. The model generates a draft answer, the agent decides if to send it or if to edit and send it or to replace it completely and send it. And one of these, we got the feedback from the agent saying this is flat out wrong. The question had been, could you push an Excel file into SharePoint? The model said yes you can. The agent said no you can't. 4 of us reviewing this error on the call all go and read the knowledge base article about this, and 2 people say, yeah, the agent's right, you can't do it, and other people say, no, the model was right, the agent's wrong, you can do it, because the documentation, it was ambiguous. It actually said that one paragraph talked about was talking about SharePoint, one talking about pushing files, another paragraph was talking about Excel, and both humans and models had wrongly conflated those into saying, yes, you can do the 3 in combination. And what we did was obviously rewrite the knowledge article. So there's a whole lot of process where the innovation comes taking the feedback loop and just updating the context, the documents that are being fed as context information. Cool. So last kind of couple of slides, we talked a bit about people that are coming into the industry early now and how the models affect you, and how does generative AI change the landscape. This is a concept we've looked at a long time ago, came long before my Matillion experience, about a good technical skill. A technical team will match the task complexity to the skill of the individual, and also think about the impact of the work on the employee as well as the impact of the employee on the work. So in an ideal team, when you've got something that's brand new and really challenging, the really tough task you give to the technical lead. There'll be a challenge for them, it'll be interesting, they can still learn even at the peak of their career. They'll write it up and then share some of their learnings with the team. Possibly the second time that task comes along, that task is still pretty complex, but you give it to the same person, it's now easy for them because they've seen it once before. Third time it comes along though, maybe the technical lead hands it off to a senior engineer. So if you look at the two spirals here, the light blue is the technical skill of the person that's rising as they interact and learn from these pieces of work. And the red is the complexity of the task that becomes simpler as the team better understands the work that needs to be done and how to tackle it. So the technical lead hands the task off to the senior engineer. It's a learning opportunity for them, and they can grow and get better at doing it. And equally, the senior engineer is going to pick some pieces of work that have become humdrum and routine for them, and give them to the junior, the new intern, as a basic learning experience. You know, everyone needs to learn to write a login screen, that kind of thing. It keeps it all fresh and everybody's learning. What's going on with when you bring in the coding assistants or the data engineering assistants like Maia is everybody moves up their stack. So suddenly, if I go back one, the technical leads jumped up. Technical leads are attempting stuff they'd never done before, or driving that cutting edge work at an enormous scale. The senior engineer is now working at the technical leads previous level. The junior is now at the level the senior engineer was 5 years ago. And even a business user, and what would previously have been a junior engineer's job is now either totally automated, trivial, or a business user can tackle it. So everybody moves up. And just what we found is that teams just find themselves delivering more work at this point. But it's an interesting pattern for growth, and we've got to keep bearing in mind, you know, how do we keep training the next generation, and how do we make sure they always understand what's going on under the hood? I think the answer is just encouraging them to stretch and scale up to the level that the coding assistants and AI assistants like Maia deliver. So I think that's our kind of summary of our final learnings. But yeah, if you take away one thing, I'd say just try it and get hands-on. Some of the other lessons, obviously, highly valuable. So we'll move into Q&A. I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Well, Julian, thank you for that. Very insightful and very interesting. And yeah, we've got some good questions on the side. So we've got about 14, 15 minutes. So see if we can get them all in.
Yeah.
Just starting in order. So Himanshu, thank you for your question. For a company using Databricks, how does Maia add value? Data is copied into Databricks using CDC, so no real transformation before it's copied. Everything else will be done in Databricks. For example, what is the license and costing model?
Okay, so for Databricks, obviously we handle both. If you're doing CDC, so you're not doing any transformation before, we provide a great range of connectors. We handle a lot of orchestration in terms of management of tasks and then debugging of tasks as they're working through. We can certainly, obviously, we can also have Maia edit the notebooks if desired. Within that, it allows you to integrate to a lot of sources. We also have what we call reverse ETL connectors that let you move data out of Databricks into target SaaS systems or other data warehouses. So obviously, if you're doing no transformation, whatever, you're doing pure loading, what all we're doing is helping you orchestrate the loading at that point. But obviously, we manage scheduling, we provide lineage view that allows you to see where each table's come from, see how things have been built. So it's a little bit of range if obviously we're doing no transformation at all, but obviously we can build, we can manage transformations within Databricks. We are generally actually an ELT vendor rather than an ETL vendor. We will we help you load the data and then transform it, so then move it within Databricks, and all of that's being done with Databricks Compute. In terms of license and costing model, we tend to agree an enterprise license fee for the use of Maia itself. Separate to that, the actual processing of data, we have a credit-based model, which is effectively charging for task hours for how long the processing takes. So the sales team would agree a costing for Maia with you, and the basic use of it is open to anybody that tries us out. So there's a fair use policy that allows people to use it on a trial basis, and then if you want to get serious about it, we then negotiate an enterprise license agreement for that. But basic use of the underlying platform is on a credit basis. Hopefully that covers what you wanted.
Thanks, Julian. And we've got a question from Sam Cook. Thanks for the question. So data pipelines often encode years of organizational nuance, exceptions, contractual rules, and finance definitions. How well can Maia operate when the business logic isn't obvious from the data alone?
Cool. Yeah. So there's 2 or 3 pieces with that. One is it's very good at playing back to you the logic, the business logic, the logic that's encoded in the pipeline. It's good at generating notes in the pipeline, particularly as a user goes through a session. It can obviously capture some of that very easily. That's the most basic piece. The second layer, in terms of what's available as functionality today, is we allow the user to configure context files. So within the Matillion platform, there are existing pipelines you can browse through, and then just allow the user to put markdown files into the system that provide notes on the data landscape and the business logic and a lot of those rules. So that is that can be a very powerful tool for providing a lot of that context. So sometimes people can just take wikis of business definitions, or if you've got an ontology, just bring those in as markdown files, and Maia can either be set to either always reference them, or you can set them up in a space where you tell Maia, okay, here's where you can find them if you think you need them. Here's where you go look for definitions. They can be super powerful. Sometimes even a tiny bit of context really helps ground the LLM. For example, we were demonstrating to an insurer, and they were super impressed that Maia recognized all their industry-specific acronyms. And all that had been done to differentiate it is when we set up the demo, we'd set up a context file with some notes for Maia saying, this is for Mr. So-and-so, he's at this company who are working in insurance. And as part of that config, just setting the context that, okay, this is an insurance customer, really helped ground and recognize the right acronyms. So even a small amount of context is super powerful, and we give Maia the ability to absorb all of those kind of notes. What my team are working on right now, and this is enhancements to come for the future, is what we call a context engine, where we're trying to be able to harvest a lot more nuanced information from a variety of sources. So this is, obviously this isn't functionality that's available today. We hope to bring it out probably over the next few months, where we are both scraping the data warehouse, looking at exploring the data warehouse tables, sampling them, crawling them, and we're creating a knowledge graph where we identify the business entities and then map tables and columns to those entities. And then we're going to start building in other types of sources where we both crawl your conversations with Maia, any documentation or wikis you want to give it, the existing pipelines. So exploring the existing pipelines and learning the landscape and the logic being used to calculate things is a very rich source of data. We think this will be super valuable for any of our customers that migrate from our older platform or migrate from a different a competitor or a legacy platform, because it translates the business pipelines, builds them out, and then of course a lot of those KPIs are encoded in there but hard to find. We plan to scrape all that and then bring that into the knowledge graph to help translate between business concepts, definitions, contractual rules, finance definitions. We're actually doing some research on this jointly with the University of Manchester. In fact, my very next meeting I have to run to in about 10 minutes is with a couple of the professors from the University of Manchester's database department to just discuss how we handle things, like how do you handle ambiguity in that, how do you handle conflicting information, how do you handle facts that are true today but only became true 3 months ago. Like you changed your billing system in November 2025, so you need to look at different tables before that date.
That last point is really interesting, Julian. The fact you're getting in, I guess, non-technical people to get involved in this, it's what's setting you guys apart. I think if you just have a software or only product focused mindset, you want to get all angles in. And I think, to be honest, I've not heard that from too many companies. So that's very interesting that you're doing externally.
With a recruitment and with a recruitment focus, we put quite a lot of effort in recruiting a very diverse team. So my team, I have a mix. I have a couple that have got PhDs. I've got a couple that came up through the placement student intern into new grad and then working their way up through the company. I've got a couple, I've also got a couple that have come through an apprenticeship program. We found the apprenticeship program super valuable for accessing more diverse talent. There's actually a whole bunch of learnings we got there that I would advise actually companies do take a look at the apprenticeship schemes. You get a lot of very interesting folks there in terms of career switchers, people coming into the workforce, back into the workforce having had a baby, folks that dropped out of university for whatever reasons didn't find the right fit. So all sorts of interesting pieces there. And what I'm really striving for is diversity of mindset in the team, because a homogeneous team is more likely to move quickly, but more like a high risk of moving in the wrong direction. A heterogeneous team, truly diverse one, will have a bit more friction, but they're more likely to spot the different opportunities and more likely to spot the risks and pitfalls along the way.
Very interesting. Thank you. We've got a question from Yuri. You said that you can just prompt it to create connector to any platform with the API. Is that with the MCPs, or Maia creates custom connectors itself?
It creates custom connectors. So Matillion's always had a what we call a custom connector component, where you configure the API connection, and then it becomes a drag and droppable component. What we've done with Maia, and so the user will put in the parameter, effectively puts in the parameters, and what the API calls, the gets and posts and similar are plugged in there. What Maia is able to do, provide the documents in the right documentation in one of the more common formats. I can just paste in a link to the web API's documentation website and have Maia configure that custom connector for me, and then I've created a drag and droppable component to use that connection. Yeah, it's a big time saver, really, in terms of pieces. Sometimes it needs debugging for the pagination. That's often a gotcha, but it gets you 100% the way there 90% of the time, and for the remainder it gets you 80 to 90% of the time, and then you need to do some debugging.
Brilliant, thank you. Kasim said, is the goal of Maia to augment or to replace a data engineer?
I'd say primarily to augment. But we're also starting to transform data engineers into gradually moving to a place where you become more like a team leader than an pure individual contributor. We're starting to ultimately bring functionality in that allows you to schedule a bunch of tasks. So, for example, this is what we call mission control. Again, this is functionality still in development, but we want to do things where you can say, okay, every Monday morning when my weekly pipelines have run, have a look at the data, go have a look at the data quality and bring me a report on what's going on, or go off and build these 3 tickets and then ping me when they're ready for review. So augment, it opens up access to data engineering. One of the other benefits we've seen for some customers is they used to say we had 5 Matillion users who were all data engineers. Now we've got 5 data engineers and 15 data analysts using it. And again, it takes the mundane work off the data engineers, because the data analysts, who basically just need a couple of tables generated for them, can go and do that for themselves now. And do so in a way where they create pipelines that you as the data engineers can go inspect and check they haven't made a mess in production in some format.
Perfect, thank you. We'll take 1 or 2 more questions, and then conscious we've got 4 minutes left. Pete, thanks for the question. Wanted to check, we kind of touched on this, but have you guys worked with academic researchers and professors? How important is that depth of research when building credible AI?
Yeah, a lot, as we just touched on. As I said, literally my next meeting is with the professors. They consciously brought a couple of people, PhD level and with postdoc experience, into the team, and part of their remit is to keep on top of what's coming out of relevant academic papers. The challenge we have in this space, sadly, is the technology is moving so fast, and the pace of actually bringing a paper to publication in some cases is quite slow. So we're also having to watch, what's coming out in terms of people's blogs, what's being said at conferences, what's being waiting for the published papers sometimes means you're a bit behind the curve in terms of stuff in the pure Gen AI space. But there's a lot feeding in terms of how we're working with knowledge graphs, for example, database theory, how we set up the context, how we do semantic clustering of errors. All of that's come from academic bases in that space. But yeah, you want to bring that academic element in, as well as keeping on top of what's latest from industry.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think we'll wrap it there, guys. And Julian, I really appreciate your time of going through this. I know we've spoken a lot the past couple of months, but I really look forward to this conversation. Cool. My last final thoughts, and I guess a question to leave with you: do you have any advice to anyone in the industry that is trying to build the next market-leading agentic product? Any advice on building this?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the very bottom question on the things. It's easy. How maintainable and peer reviewed? Does it integrate with CI/CD? Yeah, we have integration with Git automatically. Maia can deliver the pushes and merges, and we're working towards it being able to trigger a pull request that somebody else can peer review it. Obviously, it can be peer reviewed. It can be peer reviewed within the platform. That's the whole thing, that you could tag back between AI and human. So we've designed that with CI/CD very much in mind. So in terms of general advice, like I said at the top, just try stuff, find something you care about, in some ways, start with a problem or something that excites you, if it's going for a hobby project, and then try things to see what you can do towards that. There's an awful lot in the space of hammers looking for nails. So I'd say start with the nail and then try whatever tools you can find to see if you've got a hammer to hand. And the other one was, like I said, keep trying, don't abandon things. If it half works, park it and come back to it.
Brilliant. I couldn't agree more. Don't be afraid to try things. Well, look, everyone, we'll wrap it up there. Julian, thank you so much. And I'm also going to be doing an in-person leadership event, which you are kindly speaking at, Julian, at the end of March next month. So if I don't speak to you before, we'll chat then, and you'll be hearing from us again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, and do please reach out. Thank you, folks.
See you later. Goodbye.